It's called The Selfish Giant, and it's by Oscar Wilde. And so before Christmas of last year, I had what I was going to bring as a gift this year.
That's a miracle.
I did, and I'd like to share it with you. I just love this thing, and there isn't a word in it about Christmas, but it has so much to do with love and sharing and the Thanksgiving spirit that should still be with us even though that holiday is over. And it's called The Selfish Giant. And I noticed earlier when Jack was talking how many of you closed your eyes and listened to Jack. And, you know, many of us have been blessed with a mother or a father or a grandfather or a grandmother or an uncle who used to read to them when they were small. And what I'd love you to do is kind of close your eyes and let Grandpa Og read to you again on this first Sunday in December. And I hope you enjoy it. The Selfish Giant. Close your eyes and just let me take you away for a little while. Every afternoon as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are," they cried to each other. One day the giant came back. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children all ran away. "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall all around it, and he put up a notice board. "Trespassers will be prosecuted." The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the Selfish Giant, it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. "Spring has forgotten this garden," they cried, "so we will live here all the year round." The snow covered up the grass with a great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all day about the garden. "I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming," said the Selfish Giant, and he sat at the window and looked out at his cold, white garden. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. "He is too selfish," she said. So it was always winter there. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. "I believe the spring has come at last," said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. There was a lovely scene. Only in one corner, it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he couldn't reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could, but the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked out. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever." So he crept downstairs, and he opened the front door quite softly, and he went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, They were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand, and he put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his 2 arms, and he flung them around the giant's neck, and he kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, they all came running back. "It is your garden now, little children," said the giant, and he took a great axe, and he knocked down the wall. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. "But where is your little companion?" he said, "the boy I put into the tree." "We don't know," answered the children. "He has gone away." "You must tell him to be sure and come tomorrow," said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before, and the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon when school was over, the children came and played with the giant, but the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. Years went by, and the giant grew very old. One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep. Suddenly he rubbed his eyes in wonder, and he looked, and he looked. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree, quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy. He hastened across the grass, and he came near to the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, for on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on the little feet. "Who hath dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me, that I may take my big sword and slay him." "Nay," answered the child, "for these are the wounds of love." "Who art thou?" said the giant, and a strange awe fell on him. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. I love you all. Thank you for having me, and Merry Christmas to you.